On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
In the aftermath of 9/11, the U.S. government's focus on national security led it to repurpose the naval base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, as a detention facility for suspected terrorists. Subsequently, the government's responsibility to uphold national security clashed with the rights of detainees, causing ethical debates about their treatment, including the use of torture. As a result, the United States' reputation was harmed nationally and internationally, leading to intense debate and deep societal rifts that still exist today.
When the first detainees got there in January of 2002, that was an existing facility from years earlier. When there were Haitians who were trying to flee Haiti and get to the U.S., they were interdicted at sea and taken to Guantanamo. So this was what was left over from the Haitian boat lift days.
Many of the detainees who would be sent to the detention facility were Muslims from the Middle East and had been turned over to U.S. forces by local rivals or warlords looking for a reward. While some were terrorists, the majority were innocent bystanders, swept up in the global war on terror. Since 2001, some 780 detainees have passed through its gates. It's their story that lies at the heart of the debate between human rights and the responsibility of the government to protect its people. While Guantanamo has become tantamount with torture and human rights abuses, doesn't the government also have the responsibility to protect its citizens? In October of 2001, vowing to never let there be another 9/11, Congress passed and President Bush signed the Patriot Act. Among other things, this gave the government the legal rights to wiretap American citizens if they were suspected terrorists, as well as authorized indefinite detention of foreign terror suspects. That same October, President Bush also signed off Executive Order 13440, or, as it is more famously known, the torture memos, which defined the detainees as non-uniformed enemy combatants and not under the protections of the Geneva Convention, which provide protections and guides to treating prisoners of war. As a result, the CIA was permitted to subject detainees to waterboarding, which simulates drowning, stress positions, sleep deprivation for days, being forced to listen to loud music, stripped and put in freezing cold rooms for hours, beaten, and in a few cases sexually abused. These techniques were considered legal to extract information from the detainees, and it was called enhanced interrogation techniques instead of torture. Put simply, if it was in the interest of national security and could be used to glean information from the detainees to prevent a terrorist attack, find terrorist training camps, or obtain names of key people, then it was acceptable to torture the detainees.
I remember the Secretary of Defense saying these are the kind of men that would chew through the hydraulic lines on the airplane flying to Guantanamo just to kill Americans.
Despite the interest of national security, is it still right to treat people in an inhumane and cruel way to gain information that could possibly save American lives? In the eyes of human rights activists and critics, the previously mentioned executive order bordered on illegal because of something known as the Torture Declaration and the Geneva Conventions. The Torture Declaration is a UN treaty signed by the United States and 173 other countries in 1975. This treaty states that any act of torture or other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment is an offense to human dignity and shall be condemned as a denial of the purposes of the Charter of the United Nations and as a violation of the human rights. Then there are the Geneva Conventions. The Geneva Conventions were created after World War I and after the horrible treatment of prisoners of war during that time, and they outline how prisoners of war are to be treated. The Geneva Conventions are a bit more difficult in the War on Terror, though, since they apply to uniformed soldiers fighting for a country or government, which Al-Qaeda and other terror organizations are not in the government's eyes.
The reason the Bush administration decided to send these guys to Guantanamo is they thought it was outside the reach of the law. So, the U.S. always held ourselves out as being the champion of the rule of law. And after we got attacked and got scared, we purposely chose a place to avoid the law.
In the United States, prisoners have rights under the Sixth Amendment. Among them, detained or arrested persons have the right to a trial within a maximum of 3 months. Human rights activists thought that the Sixth Amendment should apply to the Guantanamo detainees, but the U.S. government didn't agree, since the detainees were not U.S. citizens, nor being held in the United States. So instead, the majority of the detainees sat in prison for years, without being sentenced or released. This led to multiple hunger strikes within the facility, with the military eventually having to force-feed the detainees so they wouldn't die. In 2004, 3 years after the detention center first opened, the Supreme Court ruled that the Guantanamo Bay detainees had the right to habeas corpus. Habeas corpus means bring up the bodies in Latin, and legally means that the detained persons has a right to be brought before a judge. With the ruling, the detainees had a shot at getting out of the detention center, since many of them had committed no crime and were innocent. The government responded to the Supreme Court ruling by ordering that the detainees be charged in a military commission instead of a civilian court. This created several disadvantages for the detainees. Firstly, the military commission at Guantanamo Bay is a court specifically created to try terrorists, and created by the Bush administration for that purpose. Under the rules, they each get a lawyer from their home country, but only as a legal advisor. As a result, the lawyers were only allowed to talk with the detainee, but not allowed to address the judge. One other important reason the government wanted to try them in a military commission is because of the relaxed policy around hearsay, which means something told to another. In federal courts, it is much more strict, while in Guantanamo, it is legal for the prosecutor to use something obtained from torture, which is usually not allowed in any court, if it is one detainee saying something another detainee did. This could be harmful if that information is a lie, and is still used in the court case to prosecute someone.
If an American citizen had been imprisoned for 23 years without trial in another country, I suspect we would be rather upset about that. But that's what we're doing.
In 2009, President Obama took office and promised he would have the facility closed within a year. He did many things to try and close it down, including signing off an executive order reversing President Bush's and banning the use of torture or enhanced interrogation techniques by the CIA. Unfortunately, Congress subverted his efforts, and a year later, the facility was not closed on account of them withholding funding until a solid plan was introduced. Before he left office, President Obama's administration did manage to set up periodic review boards to start looking at the detainees' many cases and transferred 197 to other countries or resettled them. The Biden administration also managed to transfer almost all of the remaining detainees before he left office. However, to this day, the facility still remains open, though only 15 detainees remain there. But their future remains uncertain.